I mean, you have $130 million. There's 5 guys on your roster. That's it. So you're left with the veteran minimum exception. You're left with your $5.9 million tax mid-level. What really hurt them was Alex Caruso going to the Bulls. Yeah. Because you had bird rights on him. You could have exceeded the cap. You still have Taylor Horton-Tucker as a restricted free agent. This is kind of the name to keep an eye on. Not as far as returning back to the Lakers. You still have bird rights. You can maybe go out and do a sign and trade, and maybe you can flip Schroeder to a team and bring back multiple players here. The market is chilly right now. Yeah. I mean, there is limited spending out there, and maybe you can take a team and flip him to a team that needs point guard. But Trevor Ariza, Dwight Howard, Wayne Ellington, guys who had played there before are all back, but that's what happens when you have $130 million committed to 5 players. Yeah, Laker fans wonder if they can maybe use that asset to go get a shooter to put on that squad as well. And lastly, let's go up to Chicago because they added a pair to the backcourt there. It's been a while since Chicago's been in the mix or doing something. They're trying to build a little something here in the interim. I loved what Chicago was able to do. Point guard was a priority for them, especially with Kobe White out for an extended period of time. And they had limited flexibility, so they acted as a team over the salary cap. So what they were able to do is they were able to flip Tomas Satoransky and then use Garrett Temple in a sign and trade, and then they go out and get Lonzo Ball. That is a good move for them as far as an upgrade there. Right. Alex Caruso on the mid-level exception. The big question is going to be, and Brian Windhorst talked about it this morning, Zach LaVine, renegotiation eligible. They don't have cap space right now to go out and do it. But the roster is improved. Yeah. And that's the big goal. So he can still sign a big contract next offseason, but he's going to have to wait. But I think the goal is improve the roster around him, let him wait 1 year, and that money will be sitting there. Yeah, and that's the thing for him. If they make a run to the playoffs like the Knicks did out of nowhere, maybe that'll satisfy him for this season and get paid in the summer of 2022. Bobby Marks stays paid. Look at that suit.
Should we call NBA expensive agency? There is nothing free about these guys are all signing big tickets. And the first day of free agency full of action. The big players were on South Beach. Miami Heat working towards completing a sign and trade, bringing Kyle Lowry from the Raptors. 2019 champion expect to snag a 3-year deal. Then the Heat turned towards one of their own, working on a max extension with Jimmy Butler. Have to have him in the fold. The 31-year-old led the Heat to the 2020 NBA Finals, posted career highs last season in field goal percentage, assists, and led the NBA in steals. And also the Heat took care of sharpshooter Duncan Robinson, agreeing to a 5-year, $90 million deal. Get this, that's the largest ticket by any undrafted player in league history. Robinson joined Steph Curry. Joining Steph Curry and Klay Thompson as the only players with multiple seasons of 250 made threes while shooting over 40%. And then the late word, Tim Bontemps is confirming P.J. Tucker signs a 2-year, like $15 million deal. So you look at how the Heat project for next season. Let's just say they project really well. Wow. A star-studded lineup they can throw out on the court now. NBA front office insider Bobby Marks joining us now. And Pat Riley had himself a day, huh?
Man, you got to bring out the big calculator for this.
Wow. and we have something along those lines here. But what a day for Riley and the Heat. Maybe completely transforming their roster now. Obviously, took care of some of their own. But you tell me, where do you want to start here, and how much better are the Heat today than they were yesterday?
Yeah, well, I'll start with it. They're a top 3 team in the Eastern Conference. I'm putting them up there with Brooklyn. I'm putting them up with Milwaukee, ahead of Philadelphia. I think these moves solidify that, especially with Kyle Lowry. I think the gymnastics as far as how they were able to do everything, it started yesterday with Goran Dragic exercising his $19.4 million option. That allowed them to stay over the salary cap. They didn't go under the cap. They could have signed Lowry outright if they wanted to. They didn't do that. And when you take a player out like, Dragic and probably Precious Achiuwa, and then you add Kyle, into that mix, his number is going to be a little bit higher than that 25, right around 27. That keeps you in the game here. What they were able to do, though, is Duncan Robinson, You had his bird right. So now you can exceed the salary cap to bring him back right around $16 million. And you keep on adding. And they'll be able to stay under the luxury tax, under the hard cap. When you look at here, they're under. And then, you know, and then you look at a player like, you know, we'll see where PJ Tucker is down here. I think we might even have him in the 4s. Yeah, we got him in the 4s. And then you had PJ Tucker, because what happened is that you still had your, here's PJ, you still had your mid-level exception. So you had your $9.5 million mid-level exception. PJ gets about $7 million of that. And then when you slide him in there, you're still under the luxury tax. And
How's that possible?
And you can fill out the rest of your roster with minimum guys. You're probably going to lose Kendrick Nunn, who's a restricted free agent. But, yeah, you basically have turned over your roster, you know, 2 years after they made the Jimmy Butler deal, something into nothing, and now this is a top 3 team in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah. That is amazing how quickly you can transform. It's also amazing how you can go the other way. Like, Toronto was 2 years ago, right?
Yep.
The Raptors are unrecognizable now from that championship club. What happens if I tap on this Kyle Lowry? Like, the whole thing explodes?
No, not yet.
All right. Well, you know, but how quickly it can change in the NBA, right?
It can turn quickly, and they were able to. Hey, you get swept by Milwaukee last year in the first round. Like, change is coming here.
So, obviously, look like the Phoenix Suns, you know, off their NBA Finals appearance. I mean, they're right there in the mix. You feel good about that. I'd be curious, you know, what they would look like without Chris Paul, but that's a nightmare that they don't have to worry about anymore. But Paul is back in the fold. What's that mean for them?
Yeah, I mean, when he opted out of that $44 million contract, the likelihood, someone asked me, what's the percentage? I said 99.9.
Right.
When you don't leave $44 million on the table to go kind of test free agency, and Paul comes back on a 4-year deal, $120 million. He added length to that. What he was able to do is drop that $44 million number down to around 30. You can go out and re-sign Cameron Payne, who's a free agent, and still go under the luxury tax. Now the priority is your rookie extensions. DeAndre Ayton, Mikal Bridges. Those are contracts for next year, but you can extend them now. But priority one was getting Chris Paul in the fold, and they accomplished that.
Bobby, I'm looking around the league today, and I'm seeing, you know, my eyeballs are blowing out with these incredible numbers for guys who are good players or bench players, but just incredible dollars being thrown around the league.
There were 3 players. Devontae Graham, $47 million. Norman Powell, $90 million. And then, as you said, Duncan Robinson, $90 million. 2 players were drafted in the second round. Robinson went undrafted. Life-changing money.
And none of those guys you mentioned are household names. Look, you pay the big stars, I get it. But the amount of dollars being thrown out there, as you see some of the free agent re-signings, Larry Bird rights. I wonder how many kids know what the Larry Bird rights are, right? Probably not too many. We don't have the time to dig into that. But I think the bottom line here is you have the Miami Heat in the top 3 now in the East based on today's event.
I do, and we'll see with Brooklyn. Brooklyn's got some work to do. You know, when you lose Jeff Green to go to Denver and a free agent signing, they brought back Blake Griffin. We'll see what happens with Bruce Brown. Spencer Dinwiddie's still out there. A name, can they bring him back, maybe use him in a sign and trade, but the team's up top.
Started free agency, already seen its fair share of dudes switching unis. Evan Fournier stays in the Atlantic Division, but he leaves the Celtics for the Knicks. The Frenchman gets $78 million for the next 4 seasons. And aside from giving Team USA fits in Tokyo last week, the 9-year vet averaged 17 points a night last season. We also saw a Ball brother on the move. Lonzo heading to the Windy City for $85 million over 4 years. The eldest Ball brother is coming off a career season. He upped his points, field goal percentage, 3-point, and free throw shooting there in New Orleans.
It's all ball bearings.
Joining Ball in Chicago, Alex Caruso. The former Laker teammates reunited with the Bulls. Caruso gets $37 million for the next 4 years. A key contributor and a fan favorite on that Lakers 2020 title team. He shot 40% from 3 last season. And speaking of Lakers, how about this move, or flurry of moves? Dwight Howard, Trevor Ariza, Wayne Ellington all coming back to LA for another run. The trio of vets expected to provide some depth for the Lakers after that Russell Westbrook trade. Howard on his 3rd stint in LA. Ariza and Ellington return for their 2nd run in purple and gold. Some other notable free agency deals include the Pelicans picking up Devontae Graham via sign and trade with the Hornets, and the Spurs adding Doug McDermott. Now the Suns
massive tickets. The first day of free agency full of action, and the big players were on South Beach. Miami Heat working towards completing that sign and trade to bring Kyle Lowry from the Raptors. The 2019 champion is expected to snag a 3-year deal. Then the Heat started working on some of their own, like Jimmy Butler, getting him a max extension. The 31-year-old led the Heat to the 2020 NBA Finals, posted career highs last season in field goal percentage, assists, and led the NBA in steals. And the Heat also took care of sharpshooter Duncan Robinson, agreeing on a 5-year, $90 million deal. That's the largest ticket by any undrafted player in league history. Robinson joining Steph and Clay as the only players multiple seasons of 250 made threes while shooting over 40%. And the latest word, ESPN's Tim Bontemps reporting that P.J. Tucker, a big piece out of Milwaukee, signs a 2-year, $15 million deal with the Heat. So how Miami will project to the floor next year, I mean, looking really good, really sharp. Heat still have some work to do filling out the rest of their roster. Bobby Marks joined us last hour and said even with all of this, they are still under the salary cap, which is remarkable. I personally gave Woj the day off. Usually on one of his busiest days of the year, I will call, text, or email him and just say, hey, how you doing? Like, you know, some light conversation, really bothering him, and he's always polite to answer back and say I'm doing fine. So let's focus on what has been a crazy day and night in the NBA. Anybody do it better than Pat Riley and the Heat tonight? How did they get Kyle Lowry out of Toronto there?
Yeah, really remarkable for Pat Riley and Eric Spoelstra, the Miami Heat, to not have any cap space and go out and get, you know, really perhaps the premier available point guard on the market, you know, who is looking to change teams, in Kyle Lowry. You know, he has long been intrigued with the idea of coming to Miami, teaming up with Jimmy Butler, and, you know, he just fits in perfectly. This is the ultimate win-now team in the league, and as you said, Duncan Robinson, you know, as we reported, 5 years, $90 million. P.J. Tucker, you know, this is a team that's going to be deep and certainly is going to be a real factor again in the Eastern Conference.
And that Toronto championship team of just 2 years ago, I mean, it's pretty recognizable. It's how quickly the league does change these days. Woj, the easy question is, how did Chris Paul wind up staying in Phoenix? But I think the more interesting question is, how close was Chris Paul to actually exiting Phoenix?
Not close at all. When he really pushed for that trade from Oklahoma City to the Suns last year, it was to be there long term. Certainly they had great success, and it was just a matter of just a negotiation, getting to a number. 4 years, I'm told, could be worth as much as $120 million with this new deal. Certainly probably the last deal of his career, perhaps at 36 years old, and a team in Phoenix, wants to get back to the NBA Finals, have a chance to win it, but he loves it there. Listen, he has transformed that organization, and for Chris Paul, it was just a matter of making the money work, and they got that done tonight, and he'll be back with Devin Booker next season. They've got Campaign re-signed, bringing in JaVale McGee, and they'll work on extensions next for DeAndre Ayton and Mikal Bridges.
Chris Paul still chasing that elusive ring. He is expected to be ready for the start of training camp, had the left wrist surgery done. So, Woj, thanks for joining us. Maybe I'll call you tomorrow and just say hi.
Thanks, Steve.
All right, see ya.
Good. I look forward to it.
I'm sure you do.
Back to the NBA now, and the start of free agency has already seen its fair share of dudes switching unis. Evan Fournier. He stays in the Atlantic Division, but he leaves Boston for New York. The Frenchman gets $78 million from the Knicks for the next 4 seasons. Aside from giving Team USA fits in Tokyo last week, the 9-year vet averaged 17 points a night last season. We also saw one of the Ball brothers on the move. Lonzo heading to the Windy City for $85 million over 4 years. The eldest Ball brother coming off a career season. He upped his points, his field goal percentage, his three-point, and free throw shooting down there in New Orleans. And joining Ball in Chicago, Alex Caruso. The former Lakers teammates reunited with the Bulls. Caruso gets $37 million for the next 4 years. A key contributor and a fan favorite on that Lakers 2020 squad. He shot 40% from 3 last season. And speaking of the Lakers, they made a flurry of moves, bringing Dwight Howard, Trevor Ariza, and Wayne Ellington back to LA for another run. The trio expected to give some depth to the Lakers after that Russell Westbrook trade. Howard on his third stint in LA, while Ariza and Ellington returned for their second run in purple and gold. All right, some other notable free agency deals include the Pelicans acquiring Devontae Graham via sign and trade with the Hornets, and the Spurs adding Doug McDermott. The Suns re-signed backup point guard Cam Payne, and the Knicks re-signed one of the best shot blockers in the league, Nerlens Noel. To give us more insight on how all this stuff happened, NBA front office insider Bobby Marks joins us here on SportsCenter. And let's start with the Knicks because they went into this free agency period with a lot of room under that salary cap. They get Fournier. They keep some others in the fold. What do you make of what they were able to do there in New York?
Yeah, I mean, they were sitting in the pole position with over $50 million in cap space.
Yeah.
I call them team continuity. There's nothing wrong with rolling back the group that lost in the first round here. I just didn't see this group of free agents, going out and committing. I know they went out and spent 4 years, $76 million on Evan Fournier.
Yeah.
But there's nothing wrong with bringing back a player like, we saw Derrick Rose go back, $13 million, salary. You see the room start going down when you look at players like, certainly Fournier. That number was a little bit higher than I had it projected at. I mean, you're looking at, right at, $17 million. They went out and got Nerlens Noel they brought back, Alec Burks, who's on here right at that $10 million number that we projected at. And then you just see that money keep on going down. And then Noel filled out that remaining $14 million slot. So they bring back the same group. I know that's not going to sell headlines in New York City. But this is still kind of a retooling process. They're not up there with the big boys, right?
Yeah.
They're not there yet. Plus, they have controllable contracts in case that next disgruntled all-star becomes available. They've got contracts, they've got draft picks to go out and maybe do a deal.
They're ahead of the game in terms of their rebuild there in New York. So Knicks fans, just ease up a little bit. This is not bad. This is really good for your future going forward. Arch, let's talk about the Lakers on the other coast. They bring in some other guys to help surround the big three there. What about these moves that Rob Pelinka was able to pull off? Yeah,
I mean, this is kind of what we expected from when the Lakers, when you look at what, then they use Garrett Temple in a sign and trade, and then they go out and get Lonzo Ball. That is a good move for them as far as an upgrade there.
Right.
Alex Caruso on the mid-level exception. The big question is going to be, and Brian Windhorst talked about it this morning, Zach LaVine, renegotiation eligible. They don't have cap space right now to go out and do it. But the roster is improved.
Yeah.
And that's the big goal. So he can still sign a big contract next offseason, but he's going to have to wait. But I think the goal is improve the roster around him, let him wait 1 year, and that money will be sitting there.
Yeah, and that's the thing for him. If they make a run to the playoffs like the Knicks did out of nowhere, maybe that'll satisfy him for the season and get paid in the summer of 2022.
And the stats, it's what a player can bring with their personality.
And I do think, and I know you guys all agree, that with the best title, without Dwight Howard, it doesn't mean he's the most important person on the team. He definitely was not.
He changed that Nugget series.
He absolutely did. There was definitely several inflection points along the way where he was key to that run. We're going to take a very quick friend, and we got to talk about the people watching as we're going through all of this. Not just all you, but NBA players too. They're just like us, as the expression goes, enjoying all the money going around. Mr. Buddy Hield, look, he was close to being a Laker. So hey, let's talk about the Lakers, right? By the way, Matt, you two were watching this going, this is a lot of money.
It's a lot of money going out there. I'm happy for these guys.
Absolutely. I do want to talk about the Lakers. As we know, they did not end up trading for Buddy Hield. So, Ramona, what is the latest on the Lakers' efforts to fill out that roster?
Well, first they have to keep their own guys. And their own guys are Alex Caruso, Talen Horton-Tucker, and Dennis Schroeder. I don't know that they're going to do that. It gets very expensive to keep all of your own guys. Then there's also the issue of the fit with Dennis Schroeder. Alex Caruso is a guy, I don't even want to say this because I know we're in Los Angeles and people are going to get upset. Like, I mean, if you're a Laker fan, it looks like you need to prepare yourself to lose Alex Caruso. He has.
Are you speaking to Laker fans or LeBron James? Because he's very attached to Alex Caruso also.
Look, at some point, there's a number, right? And it reminds me a little of when Derek Fisher got paid when he weren't on the team back then, but you know what I'm talking about. He essentially, he had a great run. People loved him, and then somebody threw a lot of money at him. And at some point, there gets to be a number that you don't cross where the Lakers have to say, okay, can we go 10, 12, 13, 14 million for Alex Caruso? If he's got offers at the full mid-level, which is what my understanding is, the Lakers can trump any offer. He's their own free agent. They can pay him whatever they want. And they probably should do something, because you lose him for nothing. And you still have to fill out that roster. So let's see what happens if he leaves outright, or if they work out some kind of sign-in trade. But right now, it's not looking good.
And guess what? They paid guys who were part of the championship in Contagious Hallwell Pope and Kyle Kuzma, and they had salary slots that allowed them to go after Russell Westbrook. And so there's an added benefit to paying one of your own guys, because if you have to, any reason, need maneuverability moving forward to go after someone who suddenly ends up on the market, it allows you to do so. But it's a tough one for Alex in particular, because he is indebted to the Lakers organization. He recognizes he came up with this team. But if you look at their roster depth, ideally he's like your 6th or 7th best player. The Lakers still have some more work to do before they get drilled down to making the offer for the 6th or 7th best player. The way offers are going around the league, it might not be sticking around for that long from another team. Another team might say, hey, Alex, here's a deal. It's on the table for 60 minutes. Give us an answer or it's gone. Then Alex could go to the Lakers, hey, I got this. And the Lakers say, we're not ready to deal with that yet. And it could come down to just something like that, a timing issue.
Well, also, if you're trying to work out a sign and trade, that other team has to be interested in that.
Why do they want to help the Lakers?
And not only help the Lakers, but give up some assets, If you're having a sign and trade, we're just seeing this now as we work out the details of the Kyle Lowry trade, and that starts to get reported. You're giving stuff up, and sometimes you're giving stuff up because you want to make salary fit. But if you don't have to, sometimes you don't want to.
Can we explain this, though, like the sign-in trade with Kyle Lowry, okay? So at the trade deadline, Kyle Lowry a lot of teams wanted Kyle Lowry. Philly wanted him, Miami wanted him, Lakers wanted him. And Masai Ujiri decided to hold on to him because he didn't get the deal he was looking for. The Lakers didn't put Taylor Horton-Tucker in the deal. Miami wouldn't put Precious Achiuwa in the deal at the time, or Duncan Robinson. There were reasons why there was nothing that incentivized Toronto to trade him at that point. And Masai's calculation was essentially, any of these teams that want to sign him as a free agent need the Raptors to do it. They don't have the cap space to make a $30 million offer. So they need us. So why don't we just wait until they need us and we can get something for him? And they're going to get a good young player. Precious Achiuwa is a good young player. Goran Dragic, good player. Now, the details of that are still being worked out. So let's see who actually ends up in this deal, and whether it expands to a 3-team. But when you have a free agent that's you can get something for him. You don't want to lose him for nothing when you have unrestricted free agents. So Dennis Schroeder, unrestricted free agent. Alex Caruso, unrestricted free agent. But the Lakers can still get something for both of those players if the other team wants to do that.
Wants to do that. By the way, I appreciate that you called Goran Dragic young.
Me too.
For those of us who are sitting up here. When you're on a team that is strapped the way the Lakers are, in terms of they can only make the moves that they can make, when you lose a guy who is a little bit seen as a heart and soul guy like Alex Caruso, what does that do to the roster? But then again, you've got Russell Westbrook coming in. Talk about a heart and soul guy on every team he's been on.
That's a tough pill to swallow. I mean, he's a fan favorite out here. Several endorsements. He's really capitalized on being a Los Angeles Lakers. He has the hearts of these fans. But one thing I will say, and I want to say maybe the last 3 years, the Lakers front office has proved a lot of us wrong. They've had maybe 2, 3, 4 guys under contract. Normally at this point, sometimes the point is just 2 guys, and they've always seemed to build it. And before we doubted that front office until they showed us, and they've definitely showed us. So I still have faith. We really don't know what they're going to do and what their options really are, because they're not too many. But it's always a safe security blanket to know that you have LeBron James, Anthony Davis, and now Russell Westbrook and Marc Gasol under contract right now. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. But I have confidence that they're going to figure something out. It may not be any shocking, staggering moves, but they're going to be able to fill that roster out.
And one name to watch, Rachel, as we go forward here, they're going to look, obviously you're looking at veteran minimum guys, guys who are going to sign for the vet minimum. Watch Dwight Howard. Dwight Howard, let him go.
Well, I want to get to Perk here, guys. So Perk, the big name coming in the trade deadline was Andre Drummond. They promised him a starting lineup spot. What do you think his future is with the Lakers? What do you want it to be, Perk?
Well, I don't think he fits well with the Lakers, to be honest. But I think Andre Drummond has value around the league. And I'm glad you brought him up, because the 2 names that I was looking at on that list for us with the Lakers being able to re-sign players of their own was Andre Drummond and Dennis Schroeder, right? Maybe you could work out a sign and trade deal to get those guys out of there and bring back some pieces that could fit around LeBron, Russ, and Anthony Davis. I just don't see Andre Drummond fitting alongside Anthony Davis. It just didn't look good with LeBron either. And we all know that Dennis Schroeder is not a guy that's gonna want to come in off the bench and be behind Russell Westbrook. He believes that he's a starting point guard in this league. Whether we believe it or not, he believes that. And you look at you possibly could bring him back at a vet minimum. You know what I mean? Yeah. We already know how they feel about Jared Dudley, right? Jared Dudley is a guy that's not going to be a guy that gets minutes, but when we talk about a guy that's a heart and soul of a team, Jared Dudley is that guy. This is why he's on the team. Guys gravitate towards him. He's a glue guy that's in that locker room.
Absolutely. And look, Jared Dudley is a guy who was with the Nets and then went on to say, hey, I'd like to play with you, LeBron James. And there you go. But speaking of the Nets, we have another guy leaving the Nets. Jeff Green next year has decided to go to the Denver Nuggets. A 2-year deal, $10 million. The Nets do still have their big three. Malika Andrews reporting this next season.
It's about time.
Right? Okay, so given that the Nets will not have Jeff Green anymore, but they do have those other big three guys we've mentioned just a couple hundred million times, Kevin Durant, James Harden, Kyrie Irving. When we are looking at what is happening with these two clubs we're discussing in this segment, whether it's the Nets or the Lakers, with their big three of LeBron, AD, and now Russell Westbrook, Perk, who do you think has the more formidable big three?
You know what? I got to give the edge to the Los Angeles Lakers. Wow. And here's why. Because they have Anthony Davis. I think he's the deciding factor between why I would go with the Los Angeles Lakers. We're talking about a guy that, when healthy, he dominates both ends of the floor. When you look at the Brooklyn Nets, we're talking about a team that's just giving you all offense and Kevin Durant, James Harden, and Kyrie Irving. But when you look at the Lakers, all right, yes, you have LeBron James, and yes, you have Russell Westbrook, but Anthony Davis is different. Anthony Davis is a guy, when he's on his best game, that could give you 40 points, 18 rebounds, and he could give you 5 or 6 blocks along with 4 steals. So his impact on the game on the defensive side of things which is why I lean more towards the Los Angeles Lakers.
I'm a Laker fan at heart, but I'm going to have to disagree with you. I'm leaning more towards the Brooklyn Nets. One, because of age, and then 2, because their 3 stars shoot the ball. Shoot the ball with great accuracy, and normally James Harden is very durable, so his injury this year hopefully was a fluke. Hopefully he'll be back to his normal stuff. Kyrie's been in and out, but most of the time you can count on Kyrie. Kevin Durant is Kevin Durant. He's proven who he is time and time again. But this team is a little bit younger, and they can shoot the ball. So when they're trying to find pieces, it's just more pieces that I think are going to be more suitable and easier to find than the Lakers need. A lot of shooting to help stretch this floor out, and it's a little bit harder to find guys that you can find guys that can shoot, but can they give you anything on that other end as far as the defensive accountability comes? So there's a lot of shooters on the market still that are coming in for the vet minimum, but can they give it to you on both sides? I think the Brooklyn Nets have a lot more firepower in their big three than the Lakers do, with an aging Lakers big three.
Yeah, man, I'm totally with you, because look, not just all the points you made, which are salient, but they already had a season to figure this out. Any redundancy there was between Kyrie Irving and James Harden has already kind of been figured out in the wash, and now they have that to build on. That's their standard, and they can only get better. Obviously, the health is a factor, but they are a younger group, and there's no glaring deficiency like Russell Westbrook brings to the table as a three-point shooter who is errant way too often from the outside. The Lakers, we know, struggled from the outside last year, 21st in the league in three-point percentage. Russell only shooting about 31%. In the playoffs, that becomes glaring, and you don't get that with Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and James Harden, maybe the 3 best shooters together of any team in the league right now.
I'm going to say the Nets for now, for the same reason you just outlined, Dave, which is essentially they've had some time to figure this out. But I don't know. I kind of like the Lakers big three, just in the sense that, one, I'm fascinated to see how this is going to work. Okay, but Russell Westbrook is one of the hardest workers in the game. Like, there's great stories early in his career of him and KD trying to beat each other at the gym in the morning. It was like they had to top each other, and like the staffers who had to work out with them, they come on, guys, it's like 5 a.m. Don't
take Russell's parking spot.
Yeah, don't take his parking.
Not the hard way.
That was an amazing story. LeBron's like that too. You see his Instagram videos and his working out at 5, 6 in the morning, whatever it is. I have these visions of LeBron and Russ and that like Top Gun beach volleyball scene, and they're like so competitive. I mean,
wow, Ramona, that's very descriptive. Go ahead.
I mean, like they're so competitive. Those two guys are so competitive, and they're such hard workers. I think they're really going to push each other. And they're these are both 30-somethings, so the chance at a ring. This would be good for Anthony Davis. I think it's good to have that.
I totally agree with that.
I think there's a lot of fire under Anthony Davis, kind of show him a day-to-day how these guys are supposed to, like you said, Russ is the heart and soul. LeBron is incredible, but I just think both those guys' work ethic, the ways to be a pro, because you out here, obviously in LA, you hear things about AD and the way he likes to move, and to me, that's just being young and kind of understanding the landscape. You got two consummate pros lighting a fire under you, and to me, it's a great problem to have. Either big three. I'm taking either.
Yes, absolutely. I got to work this crank one more time. Yes, because another deal is done, according to Woj. Gary Trent Jr. heading back to Toronto. 3 years, $54 million. And this is interesting, of course, on the Toronto side. Masai Ujiri wheeling and dealing.
Free agency special presented by Kia.
It's craziness here. It's free agency day. This is what happens. Welcome to those of you joining us on ESPN2 while NFL Live is over on ESPN1. Thank you to those of you who made the jump over with us. And I think we fixed Dave McMenamin's microphone. So we've got Ramona Shelburne, Dave, Kendrick Perkins, who stayed with us from ESPN. We are also going to welcome in Basketball Hall of Famer Chris Bosh. I'm going to just keep saying that over and over, Chris. And, I can't wait to see you with that jacket in just a couple months. We've got a lot of guests too throughout the next 4 hours. We are taking you through the beginning of NBA free agency and beyond, as they say. So we're in the middle of a conversation about the Lakers off season. And Chris, I do want to get you in here because they don't have a lot of cap flexibility after the deals allotted to LeBron, Anthony Davis, and Russell Westbrook, who just joined them. So you have been in this position with the Heat where you guys had to add little pieces around the edges, use vet minimums after a lot of the salary went to you guys with the Heat. So how do you think the Lakers should approach this, and how much work does LeBron or Anthony Davis have to do calling guys saying, I know it's going to be less money, but will you come play with us?
Well, I mean, free agency is all about working the phones. I think the presidents and GMs have their say-so, but, you definitely want to have a say-so if you're a player yourself. And I think that's a lot. It's very powerful if you get a call from somebody wanting to play with you, especially when you're going to have to take less money. But in the Lakers instance, they're the Lakers. They're always chasing championships. And anytime you're in the business of championships, this is the flexibility or the maneuvering or the finesse that you have to have. They're going to have to surround all of the talent that they have right now with Mark, with their big three, and make sure they get shooting around them. I think we all know that LeBron, he has his style that he likes to have shooters around him. We all know what Anthony Davis brings. He's going to bring the muscle in the paint that they need. But Russell Westbrook is also going to be a force in the paint. He's going to play his game and play full court. They're going to have to surround those guys with shooters and, hopefully get some bargain prices of them. And I know there's plenty of guys out there who will join the Lakers, and we'll see what happens today.
Well, look, I'm glad CB brought up shooting because I'm tired of everybody overemphasizing spacing and shooting, because we just saw in this year's finals the way that Giannis dominated. The Milwaukee Bucks did not shoot well from the three-point line at all. But as long as you have superstar power, you could get the job done, right? In the finals, it's all about your superstars rising to the occasion. We saw Caldwell Pope. We saw Danny Green. We saw those guys struggle when the Lakers made their first run. Now, I get it. If you could go out and get a J.J. Redick on a vet minimum, then you got to go do that. If you can go out and get a Carmelo Anthony on a vet minimum, then you also got to go do that. I just feel like when it comes down to LeBron James, Russell Westbrook, and Anthony Davis, this has been a plan that they have been thinking about for a very long time. We know all of these guys are close friends. We know that LeBron James is getting to a point of his time in his career where he's going to be willing to make the necessary sacrifices, meaning maybe having to play the power forward position. Anthony Davis having to make the sacrifice of playing the center position and playing and let Russell Westbrook lead the charge. We know that Russell Westbrook could also be the facilitator on the team. Last year, he led the league in assists. He wants to get others involved. So I think when you have this much star power and you have a guy like Anthony Davis that could control the paint on both ends of the floor, then yeah, you could fill in the gaps a little bit. But with those 3 players, I like my chances.
Well, it is interesting, the gaps they do have to fill in. Dave, Perk just mentioned J.J. Redick. Who do you think they are targeting?
Wow. Well, they're targeting a lot because they need to. There's 11 open roster spots as they head into free agency. It could be less if they retain some of their own guys. Alex Caruso, Taylor Horton Tucker, they've already tendered a qualifying offer for THT that would lend us to believe that they're going to match whatever comes on the outside as a restricted free agent. But then you have the mid-level exception, which isn't all that much money because they're a taxpayer, only $5.9 million. So you'll be asking some of these people that could get more money on the outside market to come, and the veteran minimum. And so they, Perk, you're great, but three-point shooting is a huge part of today's game. They were 21st in the league in threes last year, and Perk mentioned J.J. Redick. That's a name. Wayne Ellington, a former Laker. There's another name. Trevor Ariza, Avery Bradley. And some of these guys, the good part about it, they can shoot the three, but they're not a one-dimensional player. They can provide the defensive intensity or certainly the veteran acumen that you bring to the group. But they got a lot of spots to fill, and it's going to be really interesting to see, do they target one player with this mid-level, or do they split it up and just say, we can offer you a little bit more than veteran minimum?
Well, it's certainly become more complicated just in terms of getting the right skill sets on the floor with Russ coming there. Obviously, the big stars felt like that was the move because we know they all got together. But Ramona, this is not the first time Russell Westbrook has tried to come to L.A., right? You had such an interesting detail this morning. Can you share that with our friends here?
Yeah, well, I mean, what's interesting, this Russ move we've all talked about. I feel like I've been on this show several times and we've talked about it. But in the summer of 2019, when we were all talking about Kawhi coming to the Lakers, the Clippers are going back to the Lakers.
Would he bring someone with him?
Yeah, would he go there alone? One of the guys who took matters into his own hands was Russell Westbrook. Called up Kawhi and said, hey, I'm from LA, you're from LA. Is there a way we can make this work? Kawhi wasn't all that interested in that.
That's amazing.
Kawhi ends up calling Paul George and saying, hey, I'd rather go with you, but you should just know that I had a conversation with your guy, so if you don't want to.
So Kawhi basically said to Paul George, who was teammates with Russell Westbrook, and we remember the whole press conference and the concert and the whole thing. It's going to be the two of them. Kawhi called PG and said, hey, I don't know if you know this. Russ is looking to leave. Maybe you should leave and come with me instead.
Here's what's, it's not so much that Russ was looking to leave.